So I finally got around to playing Elden Ring Nightreign, not because I am poor or anything, but because FromSoft decided to release the game right when my uni exams started. And you know, I had to study, so I didn't really have time to play it when it came out. That being said, I have now defeated all of the Nightlords a few times, and I think it is time for a quick tier list video, where I will give my thoughts and opinions about each Nightlord. I will be ranking these bosses from F tier to S tier, where F tier is for absolutely awful bosses and S tier is for bosses who are on the same level as Miasma, for me at least. And if you have seen my previous videos, you would know how much I love and glaze that fight. In these boss rankings, I will be judging not just the boss's moves, but also the music, the visual design, the difficulty, and overall enjoyability of the fight. I will also briefly mention the rewards you get for beating these Nightlords, but they won't affect my rankings. All of the footage is from my first run, which was an Iron Eye only run. I have also beaten these bosses with other characters, don't worry, but I simply wanted to use the footage from my first run to showcase the difficulty of the bosses, so you can see how it is to fight these bosses on your first few attempts, as I did actually beat all of them on my first try, except a few of the bosses took me 2 or 3 tries. Later on you will see which ones those were. Okay, let's begin. The dog, aka Gladius, is the first Nightlord that you have to fight, and its weakness is holy damage. This boss is pretty damn good. The visual design is super cool, like come on, it is a wolf with 3 heads and a sword, and it can split into 3 different wolves. The arena also looks really good during the fight, and the music is also really nice. The moveset of this boss is interesting and feels fair. That being said, when the boss splits up, then it kinda gets fucked if you're playing solo, because sometimes the aggro feels very weird. After you defeat the dog, you get the relic Knight of the Beast. And as you can see, it is actually really good. Extra stamina is always a good thing to have. But I mean, you have to fight this boss anyways, so whatever. Gladius is an enjoyable fight, but I do like some of the other bosses more, so I'll put it in B tier. At the time of recording, the Gaping Jaw also has gotten the Everdark Sovereign version, which I will probably make a separate video about. Right now I will focus on the normal fight. Adel, or you know what, I'm just gonna call it Gaping Jaw, was one of the bosses that took me 2 tries to beat. He's pretty tough, I'm not gonna lie. The grab attack comes out way faster than you would expect, it deals quite a lot of damage and the moves can be very unpredictable. That being said, it is not too difficult. In general, the bosses in this game cannot be too hard, and that is simply because you get to fight them once every 40 minutes. So if they added a Miasma or Concertor Dan difficulty boss, it would actually be impossible to learn them. That is also why I think it is a good idea that they will be releasing harder versions of these bosses. That way you can learn the fight with the easy ones and then get the more serious challenge with the harder version. Okay, back to Gaping Jaw. I think the difficulty is just right for a boss like this. In the second phase he gets some extra moves, but mainly what I love about phase 2 is the visual design of the arena and the purple lightning effects. It just looks super cool. The reward you get is the relic Knight of the Baron, and this one is also a really good relic, because with some builds you can stagger enemies really easily, so this relic will for sure be handy. Overall this fight is pretty good, but I'm personally not the biggest fan of these giant dragon-like bosses, and that is why I will place it in B tier. Next up we have the Sentient Pest fight, and man, this fight actually sucks. I can see how it would actually be okay in co-op, but solo with a melee weapon it just feels awful. With a bow it is fine, but even then this fight just feels boring and annoying. But I will say, visually the boss looks pretty cool and the music is majestic and it fits the fight really well. Now what makes this boss fight pretty bad is that sometimes it can get pretty overwhelming to keep track of both enemies, but the worst part is that the fight just isn't interesting. The moth keeps spamming magic attacks and the poison AoE, and the scorpion just does some pretty basic attacks. In phase 2 the fight becomes better, because the moth and scorpion kinda become one, and they get some cooler attacks, for example this crazy charge attack, which might be bullshit, but at least it keeps the fight more interesting. Even though the fight itself is not all that great, the visuals and the music do save the fight a bit, and that is why I will place it in C tier. It is an average fight, but I most likely won't be looking forward to fighting it again. Next up we have another dogshit fight, and that is the Augur boss fight. This boss looks kinda like Elden Beast, but Elden Beast is actually a good boss. This fight is just very boring, and on top of that it also takes forever. It is not a hard fight by any means, but it is just extremely boring and annoying. As far as I know, there is no way not to get slept here, unless you have resistance or a higher level, which on a first attempt is kinda impossible to know. Visually it is stunning and the music is also great, but I don't know if that is enough for me to put it in C tier, so I think I will actually put it in D tier. The only thing that somewhat redeems this boss is the relic you get, which is the Knight of the Fathom, and yeah, it is insanely good, especially in co-op. Well, I guess only in co-op, because the 2 of the 3 effects are only useful in co-op. The relic gives you more HP, makes it so that a flask also heals allies, and if you use an effect it also gets applied to your teammates. This is probably one of the best relics in the game if you play co-op, and I think the reason they made this reward so good was because they knew that this boss is the worst out of the entire Nightlord roster, so they have to incentivize players to actually go fight it in later runs. Now we finally get to a great boss. Libra is just the GOAT, no pun intended. Before I talk about the fight itself, I do want to talk about the design of this boss. It is actually an NPC you can find sometimes, where you can get something good in exchange for losing a level or some runes, and I really like this mechanic. You can even do this before the boss fight itself, and some of these trades can be useful depending on the run. What I do not like, however, is that he will sometimes randomly curse you during any expedition, which will basically remove 40% of your HP unless you give him 15k runes. You do actually get a reward, but it is just annoying. If you attack the NPC in the boss arena, it turns into Libra, and the design of this boss is just extremely creepy, and I love it. Its real eyes are in the front of his face, not the sides. The pattern in the front is not clothing, but some huge metal piercings, and that thing in the front is not actually a piece of cloth, but that is his skin just hanging there. The end of the staff it uses has a hand on it. Like, I could go on and on about this design, it is just that good. The music is also just so insane and tense, it fits perfectly for this fight, especially once the god goes crazy mode. That being said, I do dislike one aspect of this fight, and that is this part here, where he goes into his bubble and you have to shoot down the floating crystals. On solo that is just actually impossible if you decide to play a melee character, because not only are there a lot of those sigils or whatever, but some of them also spawn high above the ground, and pretty much the boss is going to get buffed, because you most likely won't break them if you're playing solo. There of course is nothing bad with making the boss go into his crazy strong state, but it makes the boss way easier in co-op, and the thing is, the game is already way easier in co-op, so I don't know, it just feels weird from a boss design perspective. I did beat it on my first try, but that was simply because I was playing Iron Eye, and playing Iron Eye is the equivalent of playing with a mage build in Elden Ring, except you don't even need FP, you just need stamina. So yeah, the boss is really good, basically near perfect, just that it is not very solo friendly. Because of that I can't put it quite in the S tier, so for now I will place it in A tier. Fulghor for sure is the hardest boss in the entire game. The final boss does come close and they might be equal in difficulty, but Fulghor took me the most tries, which was 3. So for now I do think it is the hardest fight. That, of course, is not a bad thing, and the fight is quite enjoyable. The visual design is really cool and the fight itself is very good. I really like his heavy slashes that have this like wind effect. It feels really nice to dodge those. In phase 2 he grows a crazy arm, similar to what you see in like the Dark Souls games, and he gets some pretty crazy attacks with it, which do seem overwhelming on the first few attempts, but after some practice they do become nice to dodge. The relic you get is pretty decent, and Fulghor is a very great boss, but it didn't quite click with me like an S tier boss would, so I'll place it in A tier. I have no idea what the community's opinion is on this fight, but I do feel that the opinions are probably very polarizing. Caligo is a big icy dragon, and if I'm being honest, this is probably one of my favorite dragon boss fights in the Souls series. I really like the gimmick of this fight where you have to hear where it disappears and then run towards it. Otherwise you're going to get a massive ceiling of ice get dropped on you, or having to hide behind some rocks to evade the frost breath. The relic you get is Knight of Miasma, and it is really good if you are running a melee build, because Chilling Mist is a very powerful Ash of War, and becoming invisible is also a great bonus. This fight is great, it is very easy, but the spectacle is great and the boss feels unique. That is why I will place it in B tier. We have finally reached the final boss of Nightreign. that being Heolstor the Nightlord. Man, this fight is just actually insane. The presentation and the visuals are a masterpiece. When you walk into the arena, you just see the boss slowly walking towards you, and you hear the sword dragging on the ground. Man, that is just so cool. And don't even get me started on phase 2. The amount of aura farming here is just insane. He goes into the air, takes his sword and splits the fucking sky. Like, how cool is that? This boss is easily the coolest boss FromSoft has ever made. Like, there are not a lot of bosses that come close to this one when it comes to presentation and presence. Now let's actually talk about the fight itself. All of the moves feel very fair, but they can be difficult to dodge sometimes. In phase 2, the big AoE attack can feel undodgeable, but you can actually roll it. You just have to be precise with it or just be further away. Also, after this attack, one of its swords gets a random damage type, and sometimes even a status effect, and that is just so cool. It doesn't really affect the gameplay itself, but it keeps each attempt visually refreshing. I really hope that they will release a harder version of this fight, because it is just simply amazing. Because of everything I just said, I will put the final boss into S tier, because for me it is up there with Mesmer, Malekith and Godfrey. It is kinda easy, it took me only 2 attempts, and in the first one I actually almost defeated it. I just missed my holy pots at the start of the fight. The reward you get is the Knight of the Lord relic, and this one is pretty crazy. Especially with builds where you can take advantage of switching weapons, and you basically get a slightly worse version of a weapon grease simply for switching your weapon, and plus it just looks cool. So this is the final tier list. I wanna say that this is simply my opinion, and that most likely my thoughts will change, so take everything I said with a grain of salt. All of these bosses are actually at least decent, maybe with the exception of Maris, but I'm pretty sure there are maybe only 3 people out there who really like this boss, so I'm not afraid to offend anyone with my takes, to be honest. Stay tuned for my future Nightreign uploads, as I do have some interesting videos planned. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, press like and subscribe. See you in the next one.